Welcome to this episode of Solved, plucked from deep in our archives. You may not realize we've actually been doing this show since way before it was called Solved and started being posted to YouTube, so this is good stuff. I also wanted to let you know that we're temporarily slowing down the pace of production for new episodes of Solved while we reorganize our processes here on the back end to get ourselves on better footing so that we can come back stronger than ever. You can help support us in this process as we hire additional help by becoming a member. Members get an extended version of Solved before YouTube, as well as ad-free versions of the Best of Left podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. So sign up at bestofleft.com/support. And now enjoy this throwback edition of Solved. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for listening and supporting the show. As always, as is often the case, the whole crew is with me. That's Amanda, Deon, and Erin. Offer the first greeting of the new year.
Happy New Year.
Just sticking with hello.
Yeah, welcome to 2025. You're here.
You did it. You did it.
Woo.
It's gonna be great.
Welcome back, Erin.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Good to have you. So we are starting the year doing a little bit of a look back, but like in our own style. We've chosen a few articles to pick apart that look in interesting directions. The first, we accidentally pre-debated this one before we hit record. This is from Wired, titled "The Year Villainy Won," and we might mostly disagree with it, but it's okay anyway. It says, a new cultural mood took hold in 2024, the steady climate of a disordered age. In a year that rocketed Moo Dang, the influencer baby hippo, and Brat Summer into the zeitgeist, many of its tentpole moments shared a common thread. They gave villainy the main stage, made it cool to be bad. And I think most of us thought, wait a second, that didn't happen this year.
We've had this full conversation a few years ago on this show.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of think of House of Cards as being the beginning of the full-blown anti-hero hero character that goes big. But, then there's also the, like, people have been confused about greed is good from the movie Wall Street for a long time. And Elon Musk has been getting the wrong idea about Judge Dredd for decades. But that might just be a, like, Amanda Principle situation.
Breaking Bad.
I was about to
really
say
was
Breaking Bad.
Fair.
the gateway.
Scarface. Like, that Scarface was on every poster in every guy my age's like dorm room in the late 90s for a long time, and it wasn't because they thought, this is the bad guy that I should not be.
Right, exactly. No, and that's what I realized, that everyone looks back into their own past and can find the first thing they recognize as being, oh, that was a big anti-hero thing. Like, when I was in my mid-20s, that must have been when it started. And it's just like, no, it's just, there's always an anti-hero movie in someone's mid-20s, no matter how old you are. The Sopranos also came up before we started recording. Like, oh yeah, right. We've been doing this for a long time. Deon, though, in the last episode, I think you brought up the Penguin. And so this came up again. Last time it was in the context of making friends, right? Turns out the Penguin was anti-friends, which hopefully people don't get the wrong message from that. Like, that friends are bad to have and hold you back or whatever.
So I thought, like, the Penguin specifically did a better job than most of these things of letting you know this is the villain. Don't do this, I thought. But again, with the Amanda Principle, like, I'm sure there are just as many people who thought, yeah, kind of like, I really related to him, and like, you just gotta get on your grind set and kill everybody you love,
That is what the Manosphere influencers have been saying, as far as I'm aware.
Might as well.
Basically.
Yeah.
But the follow-up question, aside from Friends, which we talked about before, is did the Penguin Show make you feel, as is described in this article, quote, the shared desire to live outside the rules of play?
No, not really. Like I don't know. I felt like they were just using that as an example. I thought it was the opposite. But again, man principle. Maybe the writer really felt that way, but I didn't get that.
Well, I'm
out of it
wondering
at
if
all.
it's more like everyone does it, so like why shouldn't I get mine?
Mm-hmm.
More than like just glorifying it and making it cool. It's more
Right.
like, yeah, it's a shit world where people take advantage of these things and you either participate or you're the one being taken advantage of. So
Mhm.
I didn't get coolness from the Penguin, but I definitely
Yeah.
I got the it's a what is it? Dog eat dog world. Whatever that
Right.
awful expression is.
Yeah, I guess that's usually what they're going for. And, it's pretty few and far between that the writers actually kind of want you to get on board with their anti-hero. And it's good to hear that they like made it clearer than usual. This is the bad guy. Don't follow his example. But the article is sort of describing why people find it appealing. And it's like, even if I don't want to be that guy, but I like something about his vibe. And that's what makes these anti-hero things popular. And so here's sort of this writer's analysis of a society steeped in individualism. He says, irrational self-belief is one of the reasons villains deeply resonate across culture, says Kevin Whitener, a professor of media studies at Pomona College. In a repressive society such as ours that champions conformity to better cultivate consumers, characters who actively reject the trappings of capitalist fantasia or who operate by the codes of a self-fashioned morality in opposition to the dominant society will inevitably be appealing in ways we may not all wish to openly admit. And I get that, I guess. I mean, I feel like we talk a lot about how society is wrong and we should be different from it. And in a sense, that almost is the definition of a villain, sort of, kind of, or at least some will see you as a villain. To go against the norms of society, someone will villainize you. Of course, villains on TV and movies like actually take it farther than that and become criminals and murderers and all that. What is it that we can imagine ourselves like, oh, I could go against the grain of society. I just wouldn't be bad like he's being.
I kind of think of like the play of power and money, and like often in our society they go hand in hand. So I think of like the true villains and like what people like about them. I think it's that they're able to do what they want by and large, like because of the money that they have, that they can afford the cars that they want. They can afford relationships and to have them loose, 3 divorces. Okay, whatever. I have the money. I can afford that. So, I mean, when I think of the actual attraction and like how we operate, I think it's so much more about like that power money dynamic than like it just being cool to be a dick.
I can't speak for everybody, but for me, I think the villain stories are interesting because really what they are is an explanation for why someone is terrible most of the time. It's like, oh, they didn't just come out this way. Like society and the world and other people did something to them, either neglected them or abused them or took something from them that was precious. And that has an impact and can change who you are and make you see the world through this awful lens where you don't trust anyone or anything. And so you have to go it alone, which of course is the opposite of what society needs. And soon they become outcasts. That is what the villains are almost every single time. They are outcasts living on the fringe. And so when I watch those shows, it's not necessarily that I'm like, ooh, yeah, I get like some catharsis out of it. I'm just like, oh, right. That's what happens when you treat people badly or don't look out for each other and don't support each other and you let people fall through the cracks in society. And if you look around at our real life, real world, quote unquote, villains, all of their backstories have some of those elements in them. And so to me, it's just, here's the explanation. Maybe try not to create too many of these people.
Well, and like with what you said, like it made me start thinking about like the injustices. Like most villains have some kind of injustice that has happened that creates this arc, villain arc, right? And there's like a really popular sound going around TikTok. Yep, bringing it back. And it's someone who like self-regulates. So she starts in like, "Hey, that's not fair." Wait, everything's okay. Like I'm an adult, and like it's going around, and people are like making a joke about the regulation. I think the attraction of the villain arc is almost like you don't have that regulation. Like there is an injustice. This is not fucking fair, and now I'm gonna act that out. Like now these are the repercussions if I don't cap it. If I don't like remind myself of my morals or that I'm living in a society where I could, could face punishments for these things. So like the Penguin arc in particular reminds me of this injustice. He faces a lot of injustices that build up this character who then goes on to like serve. I don't know. I wouldn't say justice because they're just more injustices, but
Himself.
yeah,
No, but
himself at least.
Yeah, and injustices over and over again can lead to kind of a nihilistic worldview that, like, well, then screw you. Like, I'm not going to participate in this. I'm not going to be part of your messed up, unjust society. So, yeah, that's part of the way. I mean, everyone forgets that the start of Breaking Bad is that he can't pay his healthcare bills. Like, that is a huge injustice that everyone can relate to. The injustice of is just we all don't turn into Walter
But-
White necessarily, but that's sort of a fantasy, honestly, in that show. More
Yeah,
than
the
anything else.
analogy of would you steal bread to feed your family, right? Like stealing's bad, but also your family's going hungry. What would you do?
And that's the difficulty with all these things, is like the nuance that we've talked about on this show often. It's missed a lot of times because I think it's just easy to see something surface level and think, yeah, like Walter White, he did what he wanted to do. He became a big time person in his own mind. He won. Like that was the first show I thought, am I rooting for the villain? Because I think I am now, and is this okay? Whereas with the Penguin, at no point did I feel like I'm rooting for him. However, there's another character in the show, played by Christina Milioti, the Sophia Falcone character, who fits this mold, I think, a little better because it's her and the injustice she faced are very stark. They're very determinative of how she becomes who she is, and it's a lot more relatable to think, oh, I could do that, and that one makes more sense. Whereas the Penguin, I think, and I hope people got that, he's just bad. Like there are no redeeming qualities. He has a certain amount of charm that attracts people to him, and this is why I thought it was a great explanation for Donald Trump, because I think Donald Trump brings people in around him and has a certain level of charm to those around him and those that can relate to that kind of guy on a surface level in the first place, and that's why it works. And without thinking about how Donald Trump is objectively a bad person to me, I guess, but I think in every way that society has told us that you are a bad person, Donald Trump is that. But that's the appeal, I guess, because Donald Trump just gets to say, fuck it, I'll say what I want and I'll do what I want and I'll be president.
That was an excellent transition to the next quote and what I wanted to say about it, because this article goes on to say that traditional notions of villainy have been replaced by complex, sometimes paradoxical standards of what different groups find acceptable or threatening. And what that reminded me of was something that got talked about in a recent, one of our recent conversations about how the left actually succeeded in getting into government and those sort of professional realms. And so the left went from being the ragtag Berkeley campus protesters to being more inside the halls of power, which sort of in response to that, the left became more professionalized at the same time as the government sort of adopted some of those leftist standards. the left kind of like tempered themselves to fit in those halls of power. And some of what got talked about in that discussion was how the left actually succeeded in sort of becoming the social arbiters of standards and politeness and words and phrases and like how we should talk or how we should do things. And that is a lot of what the right is reacting to ever since Trump's first election, when we heard a story. It wasn't us directly, but like someone wrote a story basically the day after Trump won the election in 2016, overhearing a conversation on an airplane where people are like, "Oh, I'm so relieved I can finally say what I want,"
Right.
which sounds ridiculous to us, but is like, well, I guess that's how they felt, which in a sense it was like, okay, so I guess the left was succeeding quite a bit. They're like, no, it's really not allowed to be racist and sexist and hateful. And so for Trump to come along and say, no, it's okay, you can say what you want, some people in the country like really had that sense of relief from that. And so the whole like the tie-in with villainy is that is like to be the transgressor, to go against the established power, which like people on the left like us don't feel ourselves to be in power. But socially, I think I actually would argue that, I mean, this ties in with my theory that because neoliberalism took hold across the political spectrum and both Republicans and Democrats were like, yeah, New Deal is done, social programs done, era of big government done. The left had no outlet for their economic concerns. And so they basically pivoted and made progress where they could. And that progress was made in the social realm, which concerns how we treat people, how we talk to people, what words are allowed to be said, what's transgressive and what isn't. And that's where a lot of our political power went in the last several decades. And so now, as we watch anti-hero shows or whatever, it would make sense that the left would be like, oh, that's a good explanation of how people become terrible. And the right might watch them and be like, yeah, transgressor. That's what we need. We need more people willing to transgress this oppressive, society we live in where you're not allowed to say what you want to say.
I think the last thing I would say about this is that when we talk about the anti-hero world and the art that's out there, I think it is important to make a distinction between villains and vigilantes, because I think there's a difference. And the kind of like pure evil and just mess things up to mess things up, for that sake kind of attitude is definitely more the villain side. And the trying to correct or fix and make sure someone gets their due who wouldn't normally get their due is a little different. And both of these stories or those types of narratives obviously follow the same path. They're like people who cannot exist within the confines of our existing society and need to buck all of it. But there's a difference there. And so how can we not talk about like the healthcare CEO being murdered and that guy becoming this like folk hero? There's a reason that resonates so strongly. I mean, there are people who like the idea of supervillains, but there are more people, I think, who think that we live in a world where people who do terrible things do not get their just desserts. And that is a different kind of appeal. And I think we actually live in that world more. I think that vigilante heroes are actually the ones that connect with people more because we just don't see anyone who does bad stuff actually pay for it. And so, of course, that's the kind of narrative that sounds like a fantasy that you'd want to play out, at least when you're watching TV. Unfortunately, these things are, now happening in real life. And so you're going to see it happen in real life. There are a lot of people who find that really disgusting, but it's completely understandable.
Just a quick plug for what DC is doing right now with their three main characters, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. The Absolute Universe, where Batman is middle class at best, maybe poor.
Hmm.
Superman is from the working class version of the Kryptonian class structure, and Wonder Woman was raised in hell. They are trying to make
What?
them more relatable to the working class as heroes, because I think this is what you're saying. Like, you know, as a Batman fan, you're speaking my language, Amanda. Like,
Yeah.
I don't. The people that like the Joker, what are like? You're missing the point. The people that now relate to the Penguin, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
Mhm.
Batman's he's the transgressor. He's the one trying to fix the system, but it's very unrelatable
Yeah,
when he's
yeah.
a billionaire rich kid.
Right.
It's pretty relatable when he's not.
Yeah.
And I think they're trying to adjust that, because that's a big oversight in the last little bit of storytelling in the DC universe, is that maybe the rich people are kind of on the bad side. So it's hard to have, you know, maybe FDR was a class traitor, but he still was a rich guy. Was he able to do for poor people what he wanted to do? Because he really never was one and didn't really relate. If Batman is trying to save Gotham, but he's coming from the towers, looking down on the city at all times and not a part of it, can he really fix it?
Yeah. And how many of those villains came up in a Gotham that, I mean, we're going down the rabbit hole here, but
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
came up in a Gotham that did not serve them or wasn't equitable, and then they have a reason to turn to the streets and the life of crime. I mean, there's a lot there to mine.
we talked about this before the show, that we didn't want to bring up Wicked because Erin would go down a rabbit hole. We probably shouldn't have brought up the DC
Batman.
universe, because turn this into the Batman
Oh,
podcast
boy.
in a second.
Okay, I'll pivot us away a little, because I had this thought while prepping for the show, that how eras we live in influence who and what is a transgressor, right? Like the nature of society at any given time helps define who is transgressing against it. And so I already mentioned the greed is good line from movie Wall Street, said by the anti-hero in the film, not meant to demonstrate a good idea people should follow. And the story I always think about is a reporter who saw that movie in the theater in New York, Manhattan, listened to all the Wall Street bros cheer in the theater when that line was said. Like, yeah, they did not get the right message from that. But
Yeah.
what I thought was, maybe in the 80s, as we were like in the middle of the economic upheaval that became full-blown neoliberalism, but transitioning out of the mid-century New Deal period, that having someone give you permission to be greedy again, instead of having a society that had so much emphasis on middle class, social programs, social welfare, GI Bill, like the government helping people, and how, benefits were coming from the government, being paid for with taxes, like this whole, like what we think of as kind of feel good common society helping each other out sort of thing, made like, if you just want to pay attention to yourself, then you're the transgressor. And so that's probably a little bit of like what was breaking loose in the 80s, was people
Yeah.
had that instinct, just like the racists today are like, I hate being told I can't be racist. The selfish people were like, I'm so tired of being told I'm not allowed to be selfish. In the 80s,
Yeah. Reagan gave them permission.
totally. The 80s and Reagan and everything gave them permission, and they're like, oh, phew, thank God. Let's let her rip. Just my theory.
Well, I think also when you're watching a bunch of people, because I mean, like, who am I in the grand scheme of things, like compared to like a Elon Musk or somebody who structurally changes our society, like has that kind of power over it, right? Like, who am I? So I think it brings out this self-preservation in the rest of the population where maybe they don't think they'll reach the Elon Musk level, but they start thinking like, again, I can get mine for as long as possible while this is going on. and kind of take advantage of the lack of regulations, the lack of XYZ that are going on. And you have like a lot of, I don't know, middle class people that I think are trying to break out and get as much money as they can. And they're for Trump because like that'll help their taxes and they can get even more. And it might not last forever, but get it while you can.
Yeah.
And it makes a bad society. It makes selfish people,
Mhm.
it makes it more intolerable because as people become more selfish, you also are impacted by that and start behaving in that way too. Because you're like, well, screw you. Like, no, I don't care that you only have 2 items. I'm not letting you in front of me. Like, I've had to wait in the one cashier line. Like, I'm not letting you in. Like, yes, it makes a bad society when people are in this self-preservation because greed has now ran rampant. Like, yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. So it turns out we're touching on probably the longest running recurring theme that I keep finding pop up over and over again, which is the tension between the individual versus the social. They're like, it makes sense for people to be selfish to some degree, but that doesn't make for a good society. It makes structural sense for people to do what is good for the greater good, but it's hard to convince them. And it's hard to convince people to do that in the best of times. And it's profoundly difficult to get them to do that when there's a lot of hyper individualism and greed is good floating around in the ether.
Yeah, when someone with a pulpit, the bully pulpit, is appealing to your worse demons, that's gonna get into the ether for sure.
Yeah. So the money quote that we were all attracted to toward the end of this article says, "It could be that villainy more than heroism offers a different texture of purpose, one closer to reality, one that sees our world for what it is right now, profoundly fucked, and responds accordingly." So, yeah, it's a bit of the nature of the world. It's a bit of the nature of how everyone else is responding to the nature of the world. And then a little bit of like, well, if no one else is going to be a do gooder with me, then I guess I'll cheer for the villain.
And that's why it's not transgressive. It is going
Right.
along with the herd. It's being the villain is what everybody's doing, then you're just a sheep.
There we go.
Right.
Like being a transgressor would be doing the good thing.
You're all sheep.
I was about to say Deon chiming into that side of the internet.
Drives me crazy.
Well, I mean, I think that's a nice way to solve that issue. It's like, I don't know how to say better than Deon just said, but like those people deserve, I don't know, like mockery's too strong, but it's like, I get your desire to transgress, but let me straighten you out a little bit. Next up, continuing to look back at this year, the American Prospect has the article Plutocracy Kills, which sort of just turned into a rage-inducing listicle. Amanda, you were saying you were gonna, I forget what, have a
rage stroke.
Rage stroke, thank you.
I'll let Jenna Maroney from 30 Rock, which I had just watched recently, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah. Yeah, so they first start out talking about how just 24% report being satisfied with the size and influence of corporations, which is down from like 50% back during the recession crash when they were throwing people out of their houses for extra record profits after having been bailed out by the government. So they were already in not super great shape and have fallen quite a bit since then. And notably, a higher percentage of people report being satisfied with the murder of the United Health CEO than satisfaction with corporations in general. I find none of that surprising. I don't think anyone in this discussion will find that surprising. The list sort of goes down from like Boeing having all their planes fall apart because of the profits that they were looking for. In particular, the Stewart Health Ponzi scheme, which is like if healthcare wasn't bad enough already, they found a way to make it worse and get away with it. I suppose no one was particularly punished. They did have their assets taken away and sold, but of course they were just sold to people who are basically as bad.
More private equity.
Yeah, right. It says Stewart Hospital assets were sold off for bargain basement prices to just the sort of upstanding operations you might imagine. A group of guys who founded the algorithm United Health is accused of using as a pretext to euthanize Medicare Advantage patients. That is a sentence. And then you wrap up the year with the totally stochastically predictable murder of the United Health CEO, and that's your year in corporate journalism.
And I mean, there's tons of other stuff that we haven't even really heard about that didn't make big news because they keep going to court and winning because they have lawyers who will work the system to their favor. Again, predictable in every way. So, I think the thing that I didn't know that was called out in this article was specifically about the courts in Texas that corporations go to because they know they will be friendly to them, and that it's a trick that is colloquially known as the Texas two-step for corporations. But yeah, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine.
They'll also use those courts for, immigration and things like that. But besides that point, this is just going to be, added to my long list of gripes against the Democrats, like their failure to market. And like Lena Khan should be pounced in front of the American people like the goddess that she is. Like, like I cannot believe the amount of people. I had a whole conversation where I had to tear this bro down because he's in the business world and he wants his company to merge with another company. And like I had to read him down on all of her accomplishments and the amazing things she's done, even when she's lost cases, the precedent that she is building. And like this, I think, is the person that people could get behind if they saw like the power that we're able to have, if we could see the cases that she's won, or how even the loss of the cases is like building things for the future. If we could understand those things, I think the American people would be excited. And yet I see her on Democracy Now! I see her on very progressive outlets. I have not seen her as mainstream. I haven't seen her, again, on the campaign trail with anyone, or like really doubting those like accomplishments, because again, like I think that American people are hungry for accountability. And this is what accountability looks like when agencies are able to kind of go. And obviously, if she was backed or there was more funding, or the corporations didn't have the outsized power that they have, things would go better. But I still think those are the heroes that maybe would help our movement.
Do you really think you know better than Mark Cuban, though? Because he has more money than you, and he doesn't like her.
Yeah.
So,
well, money is definitely equated with intelligence, as we can see.
I mean, talking about stories that would get people excited, for a while there, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was like making headlines. In its early days, it was doing stuff regularly that was literally affecting people's daily life and protecting them from, predatory lenders, credit card companies, and the rest of it. And we don't hear as much about it now because, of course, that agency has been like strangled in a lot of ways over the years. But they recently were going after banks for all those ridiculous overdraft fees. Haven't heard a peep. Like, they are actually making examples of banks and doing the right thing and trying to change things, but you don't hear about it. And like, yes, I think people would be happy to hear these things and would give them a little bit more faith in government institutions.
This is what like FDR understood that the average super rich person clearly doesn't understand, is that you have to have some sort of baseline of care for regular people or there will be violent outbursts. And Lena Khan was protecting them from themselves, basically. Like, got to give some back, guys. You can't just take everything. It's structural selfishness. Like, on an individual level, maybe short-term selfishness is good, but long-term, it's bad for your relationships. It's bad for like those around you. It's just not a good practice. And socially, selfishness is destroying our society. It's destroying the world, literally. And there needs to be some pushback. And if Lena Khan isn't seen as a hero and isn't lionized as the person she is who's doing good work, then you get Luigi Mangione
Mhm.
lionized
Mhm.
as a hero. And, gonna bring it back to Batman real quick. I understand why Luigi is celebrated the way he is. I get it. I do. But as a fan of Batman who doesn't kill, and that's a huge part of his policy, there's a reason you don't do that, because it leads to worse outcomes. It escalates the violence. It makes things
And
worse
chaotic.
over the long term. Yeah. And that's where we're headed. Lena Khan should be talked about the way that we talk about
Mhm.
Luigi in leftist spaces. And she's not. And it's
Yeah,
really
that she's
disappointing.
using the levers of power for the people, which is how it should be done. That seems
Yep.
like a good story to tell.
Well, and I mean, that's us pulling someone that we're aware of. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of great people in our government currently. Well,
Mhm.
for a couple more days. Um,
God.
that are doing that work. But if you don't tell people about it, yeah, the average person isn't going to know, because we're obviously way more in tune. And I can't call out any mid-level, government workers for outstanding things. Like,
Yeah.
it kind of has to be talked about. It has to be marketed.
Yeah. And just to go back to Stewart Health for a minute. So that happened earlier this year, and the fallout's kind of been happening over the course of the last year. But that's not just a corporate story, like, oh, a business failed, whatever. Like, it's a healthcare provider system. And so in Massachusetts, they collapsed, and then all the hospital systems who were already quite inundated had to take all these people in suddenly, which made care probably less good and administrative things less good and all of those things as a result. So when people get angry that the systems aren't working for them and they point fingers at the wrong perpetrators, we need to remind them there's a reason things got worse, and it's corporate greed and corporate corruption. Just over and over point to where the actual problem is. Otherwise, people will do what they have been doing, which is, well, it must be Joe Biden, so change course. Like, that is sadly just an ill-informed view of how the world works.
Well, don't forget that the right also has now used the Amanda principle in stating that, like, oh yeah, it's not immigrants, it's the CEOs with, tons of money. Like, it's definitely them. So I still think that corporate greed is like being lost in the messaging of like what that looks like and how it actually directly affects people. I'll say by and large, I think people are aware, but there's still that subset of people who don't see the trickling down, like, not to make an economic pun.
Well, no, but you know what? I think what you're saying too is that the right scoops up opportunities to change the narrative whenever they can. So I could see, I mean, I haven't specifically seen this, so I want to be clear about that, but like, I could definitely see someone being like, well, geez, healthcare has gotten a lot worse in Massachusetts. Like, must be because it's a blue state run by Democrats, when in reality, a healthcare system collapsed because of corporate greed and corruption. And then that caused a waterfall effect. And so those are the kinds of things that if you don't start talking about the reality, someone else is going to fill in the blanks for you and tell you where to look, tell you who to be mad at.
Well, and, like, I think language matters too, because saying greed, what is greed? Like, what does that mean? They make a lot of money? Because, like, no, we're not talking about salary most of the time when we say greed. Like, we're talking about stock buybacks. We're like talking about the behind the scenes things. So I think using the word greed isn't specific enough either. That in
Well,
people's mind, they
I'm
dismiss it.
I'm not suggesting the
No, no, no,
messaging.
no,
I'm just
no. I
saying-
know you're not.
Yeah.
That wasn't to you. I just meant in
Yeah.
general. Like, as you were talking, I was like, you know what? Greed is tossed around a lot.
Mhm.
And I think that people have become immune to like what that actually means. Like, what is the greed that we're calling out?
Well, greed is good. We learned that earlier.
Right. We did just talk about this.
We
yeah.
need better slogans. I think that's our problem. Like, dang.
Yeah. What is the counter to greed is good?
Probably a 17-page
Right.
detailed
White paper.
annotated white paper. Yeah, like that's the problem.
speaking of the need for system change, we're going to talk about political parties and a slightly new take on how we could, I don't know, perceive them, interpret them. Jacobin wrote the article, Democracy is not a customer loyalty program. And the essence of it is taking aim at the idea that parties earn votes from people. Parties need to earn your vote. They create policies like products and try to sell them, right? And so this article is taking aim at that. And they give this description of democracy as was envisioned by an Austrian political economist. And this totally reminds me of the way that people always describe stuff using metaphors that are particular to their own period. So, like the human brain and the human body used to, like 100 years ago, used to be described in mechanical terms and like gears and steam power because that's what people had. That's what they were dealing with on a regular basis. And so they're like, oh yeah, like that's kind of like what the human body is. And then, by the end of the 1900s, we had pivoted and we started talking about brains and bodies like computers because again, we had entered the computer age. And so they just reach for the closest metaphor. And so Schumpeter, this Austrian political economist who died in 1950, and this article doesn't get deep into it, but like the deep, deep roots of neoliberalism that came from the Chicago school is also called the Austrian school of economics. So like, I have no doubt whatsoever that this is where this dude is coming from and was like influential in that way of thinking. So in this case, he's talking about democracy rather than economics, but he is merging the two. So it says that Schumpeter described democracy as a method whereby, quote, individuals acquire the power to decide by means of a competitive struggle for the people's vote. He saw electoral competition as analogous to market competition. Parties are like companies who offer policies, which are like products, to voters, which are like consumers, whose individual votes or purchases combine to create incentives that exploit parties' desire for power, very similar to profit, thereby driving competition and ensuring good governance, similar to efficient production. And this competitive theory of democracy and other economic models of politics greatly influenced 20th century liberalism and still informs today's common sense view of democracy. And I think common sense view is very much in air quotes in this article because it's sort of getting at like, it's so deeply ingrained in us, the idea that, well, of course, a party has to present their ideas and convince people to vote for them, that it's like common sense, it's beyond discussion. But I think I'm convinced by this article that if you scratch beneath the surface of that, you realize how like structurally fucked that is and how it does make a logical sense, but it leads to a bad society that we don't actually want. And so we shouldn't have walked down that path to begin with.
This actually, when I first started out reading this article, I was like, I don't know. And then I was fully convinced by the end, it was one of those. And I realized the more I read that the consumerist version of what political parties are doing is unfortunately what Kamala Harris did. And you could argue that it was because she didn't have as much time and didn't get to prepare as much, but she was just throwing some stuff out there like, hey, I'm going to build 3 million new houses. Hey, I'm going to, do this. It was like this kind of like, hey, are you interested? I'm throwing out this bait. Come over to my side. And instead of really understanding from the ground up what people wanted and needed, and not all solutions are going to come from some kind of, crowd sourcing mechanism, but there is a lot that could inform people who do understand policy on a larger level and can influence that way if we had a structure that allowed that to happen.
This immediately made me think that I've never called myself a Democrat. I voted for Democrats exclusively for, I don't know, pushing 30 years now. Not a Democrat, because I'm not. Like, I'm not a member of the Democratic Party because that's not a thing I can be. Like, I could go put up some signs, I could go do some phone banking or whatever occasionally, but I'm not a member of this party. I just every 2 years or so do some stuff. But that's not being a part of this. And that's like it was kind of like what Jay was reading was like, I'm also not a Harp's grocery store. Like I go there and get some groceries, but I'm not a member of the
Right.
grocery store. It's not like I'm not a part of a co-op or anything. Like it's just I go there, I buy some stuff. And that's what the Democratic Party is, or just political parties here in general. It's like every few years you go click that, yes, I want this product, please.
Yeah, what you got?
And but also there's no accountability on the other end because it's just a vote. It's not even money. Like, they'll take my donations, but they don't really need my donations because they have some much better donators than I could ever be. So yeah, we're not members of this. And that's this alienation. I think, was it Jay, did you bring it up the last podcast about churches trying to solve membership by not just telling them to come in and just be here, but actually giving them stuff to do, like be more involved?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to refresh, it was that many churches are trying to attract new people by de-emphasizing how much they ask of people and being like,
Yeah.
"Hey, like come on in. Like we're just going to have a good time. You don't have to do anything." And it's not working. And then one church that we don't remember the details of, but we read about long ago said, "No, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to try to attract people by tapping into people's need of being needed. And we're going to say, like, come to our church because we are going to put you to work." And that was having a positive effect.
I remember a while back when I was doing an episode, I can't remember which one. There was like a discussion about how do you actually do a good representative democracy? And it kind of took examples from all around the world and different countries and their structures. And one of the things that it came down to was something that I disagreed with, which was talking about the best way to do it is to have a parliamentary system where you have multiple parties,
Mhm.
but the candidate for each of those party is chosen by the party members. And like that automatically I was like, okay, that kind of already happens. That I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not getting to the same conclusion that this is. But in reading this article, I finally got the aha moment, which is like, oh yeah, that would work perfectly if we all joined a party and participated. Then you would get that representation because the
Yeah.
representatives selecting the candidate would be made up of people in your party who also stand on the same platform that you stand on and are advocating for the same things. And candidates are more likely to stay with the platform because they want to be elected by their party and then
Mhm.
also have to rely on them for any re-elections or things like that. So I honestly have now gotten to this place where I'm like, oh, that actually might make it into my dream world. Like, how do we build the best society? Like, as an option, given that we all start actively participating in our democracy, because that's the
Mhm.
only way that it's, by the people, for the people. Like, yeah, you have to participate more than voting. I'm sorry, Dion, if that's not attractive to you. But I will say I also do not call myself a Democrat. I'm a progressive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess those things aren't mutually
No.
exclusive, but I guess I find myself shying away from labels generally because almost because of the Amanda principle, which we haven't defined in a while. It's just the idea that people will take whatever they want from a given quote or piece of art or anything. And people have such wildly different interpretations of all of these political terms. So what benefit is there to label yourself when that just puts an idea in someone else's mind that you have no idea if you're giving them an accurate impression or a wildly inaccurate impression
Mhm.
based on their pre-existing biases or preconceptions or whatever.
Yeah.
But I wanted to read this next passage, getting into sort of what this marketized version of politics does to society. And this is where, like, the note I wrote was that metaphors begin to eat society, right? Like, we create these metaphors to try to describe stuff, but then the metaphors themselves get infused among everyone, and we start to tell our own stories that way. So it like profoundly impacts how we act, how we think about how we should act regarding politics. Anyway, I'll read this. It says, the competitive theory implies a hyper privatized vision of society. When democracy is treated as merely a means for aggregating private choices, society is reduced to merely an instrument for advancing private ends. Just as market society turns people into customers, competitive democracy turns citizens into voters, or combines both degraded forms into taxpayers. And
Yes.
what that made me think of is like the people who are so disgusted with politics that they're disgusted at the idea that they would take part in politics between elections, or even the most extreme version is the people who are, like, boycott voting because, like, I'm not going to give those parties the satisfaction of me helping them, right? And that is, I've been opposed to the idea of voter boycotts and that type of political strategy for a long time, purely because I don't understand the theory of change. But that's because there isn't one. There is no theory of change other than, in the marketplace, if you refuse to buy a product, then you hope that they'll build a better product or go out of business or whatever. But if you understand societies are not like a business and politics is not like a business, then those don't actually map on each other. And a lot of people get hurt in the meantime. So I've never been in favor of that, but this article helped put language to my opposition to those types of strategies in a way that I hadn't had before.
Yeah, and I think the other quote that I pulled is basically, you know, to that point, if no party reflects your values, this isn't a failure by elites to earn your vote, but a sign that you aren't sufficiently included in public decision making. That's a reframing I really appreciated. Not that I was one of the people who was boycotting, but that's a good argument to make to those who are doing this, to say, no, 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 you're not actually influencing anything by stepping out. Like, the only way to get what you want is by stepping in. And that, the quote that you just read, Jay, that talks about how society is reduced to merely an instrument for advancing private ends, that just hit me like a ton of bricks, because this is kind of what we've been talking about, or what we're always talking about, is the individualistic element of our society that just constantly is about you and what you personally think and what you personally want, and make it all about me, and you, politician, come to me and beg for my vote. And like this idea that we're all these little silos and everything has to work in that way, when you can't make much progress like that. That is just the opposite of what we need to do. And so viewing it as this advancing private ends, talk about selfish, right? Talk about the greed of the individual. Like, that is what that is.
I just had a realization that there is the widely used phrase retail politics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't had time to look up, like, when did that originate? When did we start talking about retail politics, which is as direct a connection to politics as business as you can imagine. All I've done so far is just pulled up Wikipedia. It was like, is it what I think it is? And it's just described as a type of political campaigning in which politicians directly talk to and interact with their supporters. Examples of retail politics include in-person campaign events, rallies, and direct mail. And yeah, it's like, I mean, someone decades ago realized, like, oh, right, it's marketing. We need to do politics like marketing. And we'll call it retail politics, and we'll try to sell people on our ideas.
Yeah, and that's what all those focus groups do.
Yeah. And I mean, For background information, we also read an article on the history of the Democratic Party and the changes it's gone through over the centuries now. But there have been institutional pressures and power within the party, like actively did not want it to be a membership organization. They didn't want for there to be very much outside influence because, of course, the elites who had the power were like, yeah, I think we should keep it. I think we're doing an okay job. People would just mess things up. And so it's understandable. You can follow the thread from history of how we got to where we are, but every once in a while you got to reassess at a deeper level and not just think like, I wonder if the stuff we're selling just isn't getting people excited, or if there's something more deeply flawed in the structure of our political system.
Yeah, there is something deeply flawed in the structure of our political system. What is happening is we are turning into, I'm sure the libertarians love it, we are turning into a much more libertarian society where everything is carved up and only about you and what you need and what you want. I mean, even our parties, because billionaires and people with influence are all about what they want. I want to deregulate my industry so I can make more money. So I am going to use my power of wealth to have direct influence in how one of the two major political parties operates. And this is not just, I mean, I hope this is clear, but like it's not just something that's happening with Democrats. The Republican Party has been taken over 3 times. You know, there was the Tea Party and Trump, and now the Elon Musk tech billionaires. And it's easy to do if you have the power. So how do we make sure that people who don't have unbelievable, obscene wealth and power are the only ones making decisions for us? And how do we break out of the oligarchy that we are currently living in? The only way to do that is by restructuring the party itself. So if the Democrats want a fighting chance of anything before it's too late, we have to make some big changes.
Unions.
Yeah,
Like that's
it's
like
the union
we
structure.
need unions in corporations and parties. We need organization and membership and some sort of accountability to each other. Because right now, like that's what you go tell the elites that I like this thing, you go do it. I'm not going to pay attention. And how's that working out? I think we're all
Yep.
feeling it. Like even the people who think that they won and who are loudly talking about it on the right. Did you? Because I don't think you won.
Yeah. So the article sort of gets to the vision it's looking for and says that the expectation that parties should earn our votes originates from and reproduces this marketized, elitist, and privatized model of politics. Expecting parties to earn our votes accepts and reinforces our degradation from self-governing citizens who participate in public life to consenting voters who authorize elite rule, which is sort of giving me flashbacks to our conversation about transgression, right? It's like there's nothing transgressive about authorizing elite rule, which is effectively the only option we have based on the party structures. And so it sort of describes this as the vision for the future. Genuinely democratic parties aren't brands, businesses, or elite factions seeking to earn votes, but institutions through which members cooperate to shape their society. Democratization begins by no longer speaking of the party earning our votes, but of our party enacting our joint decisions. The view of the democratic citizen member is this is my party, along with my friends and allies, which we use to govern our society. Its staff are our employees. Its elected members are our spokespeople. Its policies are our decisions, and its victories are our victories. To the extent that this is not yet true, the work of democratization is not yet finished. I think this stems from the Cold War and the Cold Warriors eschewing every single thing that was positive in any way as socialism has made it so that like literally the only place where democracy is allowed to even pretend to happen is at the government level. Like democracy happens elsewhere. It doesn't happen where you live. It doesn't happen in your life because so few people are members of democratically run organizations, be they unions or directly political organizations or any other. Democracy is it's like an atrophied muscle. Like people do not have that life skill to engage in a system.
Yep.
They only have the life skill to gripe about the system that is imposed upon them. I don't like that my boss can tell me what to do, and my only recourse is to decide whether I quit or not. There's no sense of, not just unionization and the power a union can have in shaping workplaces, but the step beyond that of cooperative ownership of businesses, where part of your job as an employee is to be a co-owner, democratically engaged in the running of the business. Like people don't have those life skills. They don't even have those ideas. And what that article was just describing, it was describing running a political party like the country gets run. Like the phrases being used about like how policies get implemented based on the will of the people. Like it's just bringing democracy one level down. There's the government democracy, and then there's the democracy that happens before the democracy. You need a political system and political parties that, as we talked about in a previous episode, talked about political parties as infrastructure. Like a political party is the infrastructure of politics, just like roads and bridges are the infrastructure of an economy. And so democratizing the infrastructure of democracy is basically what we're getting at, which like seems so obvious. It's shocking. It doesn't work that way, but we know why.
So what I kept thinking, because I was like, well, this is great. This is such a good roadmap. This is definitely the conversation we need to be having. But I definitely had the feeling of, well, the only way we're going to get this is when we get money out of politics. And I guess the only way to get money out of politics is to start getting involved and demanding that that is the case. And maybe that is the actual first step, because you can get in there and try to make change, but unless you demand that outsized influence of billionaires or millionaires and, special interests, Wall Street, et cetera, are not part of this anymore, the system's going to maybe you could get some changes done, but it's basically going to work the same way effectively. And so that to me seems to be the first demand if you can get in the door, because it's powerful stuff. None of this is easy. And that's probably a lot of the reason why people don't want to do it, because it seems sort of insurmountable.
It'd be transgressive. You'd kind of be seen as a villain to some people if you tried to unionize.
Probably would.
Right?
Yep.
I think I like the messaging that they utilize, just because I think we've had conversations about patriotism and just like how it's been co-opted by the right, and like there needs to be a movement on the Democratic side to kind of take back. And I feel like feeling that ownership of like, yeah, this is my party, this is my staff, these are our policies, that ownership, it invokes two very strong emotions, which are shame and pride. So like the shame of like your party not following through, not treating people, not meeting needs and things like that. Like, yeah, that's a strong accelerator for change. Like it is definitely a way to get people on board with a stronger platform or a more aggressive platform once they're in the party. And then of course, like the pride of like, if your party is like doing all of those things, meeting needs, being elected, like there's so much pride that can go behind that, and like just changing how we talk about parties. And I think someone, I can't remember who, mentioned it as like either seeing this as something that's happening to you or something that you're actively participating in. And I feel like for most of Americans, it's just something that is happening to them instead of something that they're participating in. So
Yeah.
I'm all for getting people into the memberships. It's just like now Now, how do you do that part?
And you need time. Like,
Yeah,
we're
like,
talking about
definitely.
investing time. And honestly, the way things work right now, and the fact that people feel they need to work multiple jobs and are strapped
Mhm.
for the very time that, just time with their family or friends or whatever, like that is a hurdle in and of itself. And so to actually make this happen, probably at first is going to be the people who have time, but how do you make it more equitable? How do you find a way to restructure things so that people who don't have a lot of time to invest in being part of their local, political party membership group, like how do you make it so their voices can still be heard and they can still be part of the process?
Okay, so you have 2 sessions.
You
No,
know?
just kidding. Look, I think these are conversations that get me excited because, like, yeah, this is the kind of thing I wanna brainstorm on. Like, let's problem
Mhm.
solve this. Let's figure out a plan and, like, execute it.
Yeah. This is the nice part of being in the wilderness.
Yeah. I guess this is my awakening to, like, yeah, maybe I need to join a group as well, and, like, maybe I need to stop not claiming Democrats and use what power I can muster and become part of the party instead of just voting for them because what else?
This will be tough because America as structured is like an alienation machine. Like it's built to separate everything we've talked about, the road system, the lack of public transportation, the lack of community, everything being a drive. You have to plan to do this. You have to plan to have play dates. All this
Mhm.
stuff is an impediment to exactly what we're talking about. And it's not some grand design, but the way it is unfolded, all these decisions have pushed us further apart, and it just kind of perpetuates. So it's gonna be a lot to push back against because it took a lot to get here,
Should
though,
we just,
too.
like,
You
pull out the old Uncle Sam posters? Like, "We need you to join
know,
a union
right.
Yeah,
or your
Or
local
the
political
Democratic Party. Yeah.
organization."
progressive
Yeah.
patriotism. Let's go.
Basically, yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I realized that I didn't pull the quote, so I don't have it in front of me, but to paraphrase, it was mentioned as part of this discussion that solidarity used to be thought of as patriotism, or like
Mhm.
those two concepts were linked. And I feel like progressive patriotism is something that we've been coming back to over and over again, and people have been struggling with as the right has pretty successfully dominated the whole patriotism wing of politics. And that was also a nice reframing of defining patriotism as solidarity, which is inherent to progressive politics. It's like we don't want universal healthcare for people who vote Democrat or whatever. Like we actually want it for everyone.
Mhm.
We actually want our policies to benefit everybody. And so our solidarity does extend beyond ourselves and our political allies. It actually extends to people who we disagree with politically, but we think that our policies would benefit them as well. And so to me, that's what solidarity is. And if that's what patriotism is, if that's how people at least used to define patriotism, like that's a nice way to reattract people to the idea of patriotism or solidarity or the combination of the two.
And I just have one quick quote that is not going to sound like it applies initially, but it really does. This comes out of like the wellness space. So there's that, but it's just true. The quote is, if you don't have the time to be healthy, then you better have the time to be sick. And the idea is you have to take care of yourself and make sure that you're looking out for yourself so that you don't run yourself into the ground and then be sick. And then you've been forced to suddenly stop doing what you want or stop doing what you've been doing. And I feel like that's sort of an analogy right now for Democrats. And this is a kind of a long term view that we haven't been doing the work to stay healthy. And so we got real sick and now we're like totally effed. And so now we are forced to do the work of fixing what is broken. And it's too bad we couldn't have addressed a lot of these things sooner, but here we are. So I guess we're going to do it now.
I think we solved it.
Did we, did we figure out how to solve it?
Yeah, us four just need to execute, afterwards, and then it will be truly solved.
Oh no, this
This,
just four.
this is on us. Well, I guess if you'd like to help us execute, because apparently we've taken this task on for ourselves, you can send us a voicemail or text at 202-999-3991 or send an email to j@bestofleft.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, this is really happening, so act like what you say and do matters, and do what matters most.